Now on LWT, the first in a series of 8 news bulletins featuring the events of the very first Holy Week, reported as if they were unfolding now.
Dateline Jerusalem, the news with Martyn Lewis.
Crisis at Passover, Jerusalem on full alert as dissidents infiltrate the pilgrimage to the Jewish holy city. Will Rome's governor declare a state of emergency? Fears grow that radical troublemakers will exploit resentment of Roman rule. In other headlines, as Pontius Pilate travels from his seaside palace to Jerusalem, can Rome trust a governor tagged with treason? Boom time for the temple, but there's growing concern about commercialization and corruption during Jewish Holy Week.
And we've the background to today's demonstration. The awkward squad from Galilee are back in town, and this time they say they mean business.
Good evening and welcome to our special bulletin with the latest on the developing crisis in Palestine. We have cameras positioned at key locations throughout the holy city of Jerusalem as intelligence reports from both Roman and Jewish security sources forecast disturbances during the politically sensitive Passover period. It's feared that dissidents have infiltrated the genuine pilgrims, and Rome is reported to have doubts about the competence of the governor, Pontius Pilate, to control the situation. David Jessel has the latest from Jerusalem.
It's that time of year again when the Jews pray to their God and the authorities hold their breath and cross their fingers that the Passover will pass off peacefully. In one frantic week, the population of Jerusalem rockets from 30,000 to 300,000.
But crowds on such a scale are a major security headache. There have already been several arrests, including that of a known local terrorist, Barabbas, on a charge of murder.
Constant monitoring of the crowds means that news of any disturbance gets straight back to the authorities. If it's severe enough, direct to the governor, Pontius Pilate, when he makes one of his rare excursions from his seaside palace in the northwest of the country to Jerusalem for the duration of the Jewish Holy Week. Passover is as much a political as a sacred occasion. It commemorates the Jewish deliverance from Egyptian slavery. All too easily, nationalist troublemakers can use the festival and the crowds as a pretext to whip up anti-imperial feeling. This man has been following one small militant group which recently arrived in the city from the northern province of Galilee. The 2-year-old so-called Jesus movement seems to be intent on making some sort of public statement.
I think there's going to be a catastrophic statement for the movement, because Jesus is preaching a kingdom of God, yet this is part of the Roman Empire. The Romans are going to interpret it as treason, and it could be an explosion.
An explosion would be disastrous not just for the Jesus movement, but for the Jewish authorities. Jerusalem's high priest Caiaphas has been told to keep his people under control. Otherwise, Rome will impose martial law, may even close the temple. This is David Jessel in Jerusalem.
Palestine has been a security problem for the empire for many years. Situated at the eastern fringe of the empire, it's at the crossroads of Middle Eastern trade. Egypt, to the south, is the breadbasket of the region, rich in grain. Further east are the lands of silk and spice. Palestine itself produces virtually nothing. Its people are poor and complain about taxes levied by Rome. Under King Herod's rule, mass executions and the so-called massacre of the innocents in Bethlehem served as a warning to would-be dissidents. Rome has since imposed direct rule, and the present governor, Pontius Pilate, is the 5th prefect to hold office in Judea. Jerusalem's temple will be at the center of this week's celebrations, but some people fear that the spiritual message of Passover is being corrupted by commerce and that the temple authorities are to blame. This from Richard Lindley.
The pilgrims come from all over the empire, from the dusty villages of the Judean wilderness, from the chilly nations of the North Atlantic, the sunny islands of the Mediterranean, from Rome itself. And what do they all need to take part in this festival at the heart of their religion? Faith, yes, but faith alone is not enough. They need this. The shekel, one of the most stable currencies in the empire, is the only thing that will get you anywhere near the temple. Passover means boom time for the money changers. They've got a captive market. You can come to Jerusalem with all the currencies of the known world, but the temple won't touch them. Those who control the sacred purse strings only accept official temple currency. Not everyone believes that the money changers or even the temple itself is giving them a fair deal. Already there are rumors that the troublemakers have chosen the commercialization of the temple and the alleged corruption of its staff as the focus of their Passover protests. It's not just the temple tills that are ringing, the alarm bells are going off too. This is Richard Lindley at the temple, Jerusalem.
You're watching Dateline Jerusalem as tension mounts over the upcoming Passover festival. Coming up later in the programme, Pilate's future in the balance. Will Rome recall a man tainted with treason? And the first demonstration of the week, how a donkey found itself at the centre of attention. First, the view from Rome. Pilate's authority in Judea is threatened not only by mutinous subjects, but by politics at home. Our Rome Affairs correspondent Dennis Toohey reports.
Rome is still on full security alert after the abortive coup by the traitor Sejanus, who was recently executed for treason. Agents of the Praetorian Guard, the emperor's personal bodyguard, are busy investigating all those with links to the traitor, including Pilate, who owes his governorship of Judea to the patronage of Sejanus. To consolidate his lust for power, Sejanus had plenty of opportunities to put his cronies in office. The whisper from the secret power brokers at the highest level of state is that any hint of disloyalty by the men Sejanus put in office, men like Pilate, will lead to instant dismissal, or worse.
There'll be one way of telling just where Pilate's loyalties lie. Sejanus was a fanatical anti-Semite, losing no opportunity of persecuting the Jews of this city. So just how Pilate handles any trouble in Jerusalem will be a sure pointer as to whether or not he has renounced the policies of Sejanus, his disgraced former patron. This is Dennis Toohey in Rome.
Now, back to that demonstration. Earlier today, our cameras in the west of Jerusalem recorded the arrival of a group of pilgrims whose presence has been giving some concern to the authorities. The group comes from Galilee and is led by a rabbi who's made quite a name for himself in the Nazareth region. The group is causing concern because some of them believe the rabbi has supernatural healing powers and even see him as a future leader of the Jewish people. The group is believed to have come to Jerusalem before, but never in such numbers. Later in the day, the group staged an unofficial and unauthorized parade through the streets of Jerusalem, which seems to have passed off peacefully. Linda Bryans has been to the scene of the rally.
Jerusalem's street sweepers had better get used to it. This looks like being a busy week for them, not just clearing up after the thousands of pilgrims, but coping with the aftermath of demonstrations, like the one earlier this afternoon. But there's something significant and possibly sinister in some of the litter left behind. This is a palm frond, and in today's circumstances, it's as provocative as a banner or a placard. Palm leaves are the symbol of the state. They've been on Jewish coins for hundreds of years. They're also associated with brushing away all traces of evil from the temple. So when people wave these, it's more than a leaf. It represents a claim to both political and religious authority. This is the village of Bethphage, where the movement's leader rented a donkey to enter the city below. And the fact that he chose a donkey is significant, that according to Jewish tradition, when their longed-for Messiah comes, he will enter Jerusalem not on a mighty war horse, but on a humble donkey. Though such a modest means of transport hardly suggests a man with a hunger for political power. But the impact he's making is growing by the hour, even though most of the tens of thousands who've come here have come not to protest, but to celebrate their holy days in the traditional manner. Linda Bryans on the day the Galileans came to Jerusalem.
So, what's known about this small dissident movement? It seems to be led by a teacher called Jesus, who comes from a Nazareth family in Galilee, the birthplace of political and religious dissent. Entry into the Jesus movement seems to involve baptism, ritual washing. An earlier so-called Baptist, John, is believed to be a cousin of Jesus. This charismatic leader, with his 12-man inner circle, has attracted large crowds with his message of peace and social justice. And local rumour credits him with extraordinary success in faith healing. Jesus talks of an imminent new kingdom under God's rule and calls for a new spirit of penitence and forgiveness. With me now to assess the impact of the Jesus movement is our Jewish affairs expert, Rabbi Tony Bayfield. Tony, how important is the Jesus movement now that he's taking his message into Jerusalem, the heart of the Jewish faith?
Well, it's not just Jerusalem, it's the time of the year. Festival of Passover, festival of the liberation from slavery in Egypt, lots of contemporary references and overtones. He's bound to draw crowds. Crowds always spell trouble as far as the authorities are concerned. I think they're going to be very nervous indeed.
And presumably the authorities are going to be keeping a very close eye on Jesus and his 12 followers.
Particularly given his Galilean background and the reputation of Galileans as opponents of Roman rule, yes, I should think they'll be watching him like a hawk.
Tony, thanks very much. And for the latest, we can now go over live to our reporter, Linda Bryans. Linda.
Yes, I'm in Bethany, which is a small village just outside Jerusalem. It's almost a suburb, in fact. But it's here that the Jesus movement has its headquarters here in Jerusalem, at the home of a wealthy patron called Lazarus. Now, he is a man who's convinced that Jesus himself is responsible for his own miraculous deathbed recovery.
And do we know if they're planning any more parades like that business with a donkey?
Well, first of all, let me give you the latest on that particular episode. The Jesus movement seems to be split. One follower close to Jesus has been briefing journalists, and he's been saying that this is the start of a bid for the political leadership of the Jewish people. Other people are saying no, it's more of a revolution of hearts and minds than a call to arms that Jesus is leading. But in the highly charged atmosphere of Passover, his talk of a new kingdom is bound to stir up nationalist feelings.
Thanks, Linda. And I believe that Richard Lindley has an update from the temple.
Yes, and I may have an answer to the question you put to Linda. Security here at the temple is being dramatically intensified after a secret visit earlier by Jesus and some of his confederates. It's being seen here as a sort of reconnaissance mission for some sort of direct action in the coming days, targeting the shops and bureau de change surrounding the temple precincts and the corruption which he says they represent. As I reported earlier, there is some concern about the commercialization of temple business, and it's exactly the sort of public discontent that a dissident troublemaker could exploit.
Thanks, Richard. And just time for a look at tomorrow's headlines. The Jerusalem Post has this headline, Hosanna to Rabbi Who, reflecting the fact that a man from Nazareth is virtually unknown, and in Haaretz, temple threat from Jesus movement, as we've just reported. Till tomorrow, from Dateline Jerusalem, good night.